You call the generator company. You wait. Then the quote lands in your inbox, and it doesn't feel like a page about electricity. It feels like a car dealership printout. 15,000. 18. Sometimes north of 20. Once the trencher shows up to bury a gas line, and the electrician adds the transfer switch. You haven't even paid for a single kilowatt yet. That number is the reason so many people just close the tab. And then the power goes out anyway, 6 months later at 11 at night, and you're standing in your kitchen with a phone flashlight wondering if you should have just paid it. Here's the thing nobody tells you at that point. Japan, a country that gets hit with more earthquakes, more typhoons, and more grid failures in a single year than most American states see in a decade, has almost none of these giant standby units parked next to houses. Drive through a residential street in Osaka or Sendai, and you won't see rows of Generac boxes humming along the side of the house the way you'd see in a Florida or Texas neighborhood after storm season. You'll see solar panels on rooftops, maybe a compact battery box by the entrance. That's about it. That's not because Japanese households don't worry about blackouts. If anything, they plan for them more seriously than most Americans do. It's because they solve the same problem from a completely different direction. Instead of one enormous machine trying to power an entire house at once, the approach is smaller, cheaper, distributed, built around the idea that you don't actually need to run your whole house during an outage. You need to run the parts of your house that matter for as long as the outage lasts, without digging a trench in your yard or signing a maintenance contract for the next 15 years. I've spent a long time looking into backup power. The expensive kind, the cheap kind, the kind that looks great on paper and fails the first time you actually need it. And this is one of the few methods I've come across that genuinely holds up. It's inexpensive, it doesn't require a permit in most cases, and it scales with your budget instead of demanding all the money up front. So here's what I'm going to walk you through. Why this method exists in Japan in the first place. Exactly what it's built from, because it's not one gadget, it's a small system. And then, step by step, how you put together the same setup for your own home at a fraction of the generator price tag you just got quoted. Let's start with the why, because it actually explains everything else. Japan sits on 4 tectonic plates. Not 1, not 2, 4. It gets thousands of measurable earthquakes a year, and every few years, one big enough that the whole country stops and watches the news. On top of that, you've got typhoons rolling through almost every summer, tearing down power lines the same way hurricanes do along the Gulf Coast. So if any country on Earth had a reason to bolt a $20,000 standby generator next to every house, it would be this one. They didn't. And it's not because the technology doesn't exist there. Japan makes some of the best batteries and inverters on the planet. It's because the physical reality of how people live got in the way. Most Japanese homes, especially in cities, sit close together on small lots, sometimes with barely enough space to walk around the outside of the house. There's often nowhere to put a machine the size of a small refrigerator, let alone bury a fuel line next to it. Add strict building and electrical codes. Regulators there require safety certification on anything plugging into a home circuit, and a giant standby unit stops being expensive and starts being borderline impossible for a huge share of households. So the solution shifted. Instead of asking, how do we power the whole house? The question became, what actually needs power and for how long? That's the entire philosophy behind the method, and it's the part most people miss when they're staring at that generator quote. Here's what the system is actually made of, piece by piece. First, a portable power station. Think of it as a large, sealed battery with outlets built in, roughly the size of a cooler. Second, a way to recharge it. Usually a small solar panel, sometimes just the wall outlet before the storm hits. Third, and this is the part people skip, a plan, a short list of exactly which circuits or appliances matter during an outage, written down before you ever need it. Refrigerator, a couple of lights, phone chargers, maybe a fan or a space heater, depending on the season. That's it. 3 pieces. No trench, no gas line, no 15-year service contract. And because nothing is hardwired into your electrical panel unless you choose to add that step, most of it needs 0 permits and 0 electrician visits to get started. Next, I want to show you exactly how those 3 pieces work together in a real outage. and where the real cost difference comes from. Picture the outage itself, because that's where this stops being theory. The grid drops. In a whole home generator setup, there's a delay, 10-20 seconds, while a transfer switch senses the loss and the engine kicks over. With the portable system, there's no delay to think about because it's already sitting there, charged, waiting. You plug in the fridge first. That's priority one. Not because it's dramatic, but because everything inside it starts warming up the second it loses power, and a full fridge only buys you a few hours before food safety becomes a real question. Next, a couple of lamps or a small LED light strip if you want to stretch the battery further. Then your phone, because during any real outage, your phone is your weather updates, your neighborhood group chat, your way of knowing when the power company expects things back on. A mid-sized power station, the kind that costs somewhere in the few hundred to low $1,000 range, depending on capacity, can usually keep a refrigerator running along with lights and small electronics for a stretch measured in hours, sometimes a full day if you're conservative about what you plug in. That's not whole house power. Nobody's claiming it runs your central air conditioning or an electric oven. But for the outages most people actually experience, the kind that last a few hours to a day or two, it covers exactly what matters and nothing you don't need. Now here's where the solar panel earns its place. If the outage stretches past a day, which does happen, you're not stuck watching a battery bar drop toward zero with no way to refill it. You set the panel outside, angle it toward the sun, and it trickles power back into the station while you sleep, while you're at work on your laptop, while life keeps going. It's slow compared to plugging into a wall. That part's honest. But slow and free beats. I have zero backup left, and the power company says another 2 days. Compare that to the generator route. You're paying up front for capacity you'll use maybe a handful of times a year, size for the worst-case scenario instead of the actual average one. You're paying for fuel storage for annual service visits for a machine that needs to start and run correctly under pressure at 2 a.m. in the rain, the one time it actually matters. The portable approach flips that. You buy what you need for the outages you actually get. You can add a second battery unit later if your situation changes. You're never locked into one number decided the day the contract was signed. Setting it up yourself takes less time than most people expect, and that part comes next. Setting this up isn't complicated, and that's kind of the point. Start by figuring out what you actually need to keep running. Grab your fridge, check the label inside the door or on the back. It'll list wattage, usually somewhere between 100 and 800 watts depending on the model. Do the same for anything else on your must-keep list. Add those numbers up. That single number tells you which size power station actually fits your situation, instead of guessing or buying whatever's on sale. From there, buy the unit size to that number. With a little headroom, you don't want to run it right at its limit. Most come ready out of the box. Charge it fully once from a wall outlet before you ever need it, the same way you'd charge a phone before a trip. Store it somewhere accessible, not buried in the back of a closet behind the holiday decorations. If you're adding solar, get a panel rated to match the station's charging input. This part's worth double-checking against the manufacturer's specs, since mismatched panels either won't charge properly or, in some cases, can damage the equipment. That's one spot where it actually pays to read the manual instead of skimming it. Now, I want to be straight with you about where this method has real limits, because a good plan accounts for its own weaknesses. This isn't the right fit for every situation. If you rely on medical equipment that needs constant, high-wattage power, certain oxygen concentrators, dialysis machines, that category of device, talk to your equipment provider and possibly a licensed electrician about what level of backup you actually need. That's not a place to improvise. If you live somewhere with genuinely long outages, multiple days on end, every single year, a whole home generator or a larger battery system tied into solar might still make more sense for you specifically, even with the higher upfront cost. And if you've got central air conditioning you absolutely cannot live without in a heat wave, no portable station on the market is going to carry that load. You need something built for a different scale entirely. For most people, though, the ones facing outages that last a few hours to a couple of days, a handful of times a year, this smaller, distributed approach does the actual job the generator was supposed to do at a fraction of the price and without turning your yard into a construction site. Figure out your number. Buy accordingly. Charge it before you need it, not after. If you end up building a setup like this, I'd genuinely like to know what you went with. Drop in the comments.